Hi, Algebra 2. Today we are going to discuss Chapter 11.2, which is on populations, samples, and hypotheses. Recalling that we're in a chapter on data analysis, we're going to look at some vocab today and how to perceive that vocab in different situations. So our first two words are going to be population and sample. And the population is a collection of data that you want info from. So the whole large collection of data. A sample is a subset of that population. For examples, we just had the 2020 census. So a census is going to be data from an entire population, but maybe then we only want the data from Kansas, and that would be a subset, or even Potawatomi County, which would be another subset of that entire population. So we're going to look at some examples and try to distinguish between the population and the sample. Number 1 says, in a city, a survey of 3,257 adults ages 18 and over found that 2,605 of them own a tablet. So we need to identify what is the population and what is the sample. So the population is actually everyone 18 and over. Okay, that's our population. They surveyed a sample of them, and that sample was this 3,257 adults that they surveyed. So real quick, if you were trying to figure out, how many adults 18 and over in the state of Kansas own a tablet, it wouldn't make much sense for us to actually survey every adult. So what you do is you take a sample of them, and we could talk about how to make your sample representative of the whole, but you take a sample of them to try to figure out what percent of the whole population would own a tablet in this case. Moving on to number 2. To find out the consumer's response towards a new flavor of sports drinks, a company surveys 1,000 athletes who drink sports drinks and finds that 726 of them like the new flavor. So what is the whole population that they're looking at? Okay, it is athletes, and not just athletes, but athletes who drink sports drinks. That's the whole population. The sample that they surveyed was this 1,000 athletes who drink sports drinks. Okay, and the one thing that I left off last time, if we want to describe the sample. So if I want to describe the sample consists of 726 athletes who like the drink, and then the rest, which would be 274 who don't like the drink. And that's how you would describe the sample. So I want you to see if you can pause and do number 3 just to make sure that you were catching on. So hopefully you realize that the whole population they're talking about is all the high school students in this said district. The sample is the 1,500 that they surveyed. And what they have found is that 824 of them have a part-time job in the summer and 676 of them do not. So 2 other vocab words that we need to talk about today are parameter and statistic. And a parameter is a numerical description of a population characteristic. So some numerical descriptor of the entire population, whereas a statistic is a numerical description of a sample characteristic. So it depends on if you're talking about the whole large population or if you're talking about the subset of a sample. And one reason it's important to distinguish between these two is because you're not usually going to collect data on an entire population. And so we collect data on a sample, and then we're going to project that into what we would assume it would be for that population. So that's the difference between a parameter and a statistic. So continuing on with our extra practice, we want to determine whether the numerical value is a parameter, does it go to the large population, or is it a statistic, does it go to a sample? Number 4 says 82% of the residents in one neighborhood in a town voted to approve the building a bike lane through town. So does that 82% represent the whole entire population, or does it represent a sample of that population? It represents a sample of that population. So we are looking at a statistic. And it is because that one neighborhood, right, that one neighborhood is a sample of the whole population or a subset of the whole population and not the whole population. So moving on to number 5, it says in a science class, 25% of the students wear glasses. So do you think this represents the population or a subset, a sample of that population? We're actually talking about the whole population. We're just talking about this one science class. So your population doesn't have to be huge. In this case, we're just talking about this one science class, so this is actually a parameter. Right? The whole population is being looked at. And that whole population happens to just be this one science class. So number 6, in a recent year, the median household income in the United States was about $52,000. So do we think that's a whole population, or do we think that is a subset or a sample? This is going to be the whole population. We're looking at everybody in the United States. So again, this is a parameter because we're looking at the whole population. And last for today, we have a survey of some visitors to a museum found that 84% thought the new planetarium was very exciting. So do we think that they surveyed the whole population or just a sample? Well, they surveyed a sample because we have the wording some visitors. So that makes this a statistic because a sample was surveyed and not everybody. So the difference between parameter and statistic is if you're surveying everybody or a subset of them. All right, that's what I got for you for 11-2. Let me know if you have questions and have a good day.